What is a suspensive condition? The answer really lies in the name. A suspensive condition is a condition that suspends the working of a specific deed of sale. So it suspends the operation of that contract coming into existence until such time as that condition has been fulfilled. It's not to be confused with a normal term of the agreement. A normal term of the agreement, for example, payment of the purchase price, is just the term that the purchaser needs to comply with. A suspensive condition really says that if that condition is not fulfilled, the deed of sale never comes into existence. So the purchaser could then walk away without any further repercussions. The most common examples of suspensive conditions are bond approval and the sale of the purchaser's property. We're going to look at those in a little bit more detail just now. Agents must please be aware. Never use the words subject to when you add an additional clause into your agreement unless you really have to. The minute you add a clause under additional clauses and you say that this offer is subject to a border beetle certificate being provided, you have created a suspensive condition in your deed of sale completely unnecessarily. Suspensive conditions are not ideal. We don't want the operation of the agreement or the working of this offer to purchase to actually be suspended unnecessarily. So in that border beetle example, you will always rather say the seller is to provide the purchaser with a border beetle certificate prior to registration of transfer. So just an example. Stay clear of subject to's. You don't want to create them unnecessarily. So coming back to the most common examples of subject to's or suspensive conditions, firstly being the bond, just means that if the purchaser makes his offer subject to him obtaining bond finance for a specific amount by a specific date, and that doesn't happen, the deed of sale just falls away. So the deal will not happen. The purchaser cannot be sued afterwards for damages because he wasted the seller's time. He made his offer subject to him obtaining bond approval for a specific amount. Now these days we have the National Credit Act, so we don't really refer to subject to bond approval anymore. We refer to subject to the purchaser being issued with a quotation by a financial institution, because this tells us that that purchaser qualifies for a loan and that he then, once the quotation has been issued, cannot back out of that deed of sale anymore, because we know that he qualifies. We don't want to give him the opportunity to either take up the loan or reject the loan, because then he did waste the seller's time. So if you see in the deed of sale that it's subject to a quotation being issued, know that that is the reason why those words replace the words subject to a bond being approved. Now we also did mention that a suspensive condition must be fulfilled within the time period given for fulfillment. So if you have given the purchaser until the 30th of June to obtain bond approval, that deed of sale dies on the 30th of June if there's no bond approval. You cannot give the purchaser an extension of time after the 30th of June. You can only give him that extension prior to that condition lapsing on the 30th of June. So if the seller is willing to give the purchaser an extension of time to obtain bond approval, that extension must be granted prior to the day that that suspensive condition expires. If an amount has been stipulated for that bond and the bond is approved for a lesser amount, that suspensive condition has not been fulfilled, and one will have to ensure that that condition is either amended or that the deed of sale provides for the purchaser being able to accept such lesser amount unilaterally in writing. Because the suspensive condition, like we said, must be fulfilled timeously and to the letter. So always ensure that the bond was granted timeously for the right amount, and if it was for a lesser amount, that you actually get the purchaser to accept such lesser amount in writing. Otherwise your suspensive condition will lapse. The same rules apply for a suspensive condition relating to the sale of the purchaser's property. Once you've established the time period given to that purchaser to sell his property, that deed of sale will lapse on the date given to the purchaser to sell his property. So if the property needs to be sold prior to the 30th of June, don't wait until the 1st of July to try and give the purchaser an extension of time to get his property sold. You have to do so prior to expiry of the time period given, because it is a suspensive condition. Once you have established the time period given to the purchaser to sell his property to enable him to buy the new property, make sure that you assist him and that he understands that if the property is not sold by that date, that the contract will actually lapse unless prior to expiry of that time given to him to sell his property to enable him to buy the new property, the seller grants him an extension of time. The seller doesn't have to grant him an extension of time. But the bottom line is, a suspensive condition is such an important condition, because if it's not fulfilled timeously and to the letter, and there is no an addendum or no amendment to that specific clause signed by both parties, the agreement will lapse and will be of no further force or effect. Once a suspensive condition is fulfilled timeously and for the right amount or to the letter, like we said, the contract is now valid and binding. The operation thereof is no longer suspended. Both parties are now liable and need to comply with the terms and conditions as set out in the deed of sale. Transfer will then proceed, and the purchaser must provide guarantees or make payment as stipulated in the deed of sale.